Morning, everybody. Welcome. We're delighted to have you here. The one thing about World Bank IMF weekend is that the traffic just becomes impossible. So I do want to say thank you to all of you for coming here on time. But we've got a bunch of colleagues that haven't yet arrived. So but it's being broadcast and we're recording it, so it's going to be just fine. So thank you. When we have events like this with outside groups, we always make a little safety announcement. Mike Green is going to be responsible for your safety. He's going to be here through the program. If we hear a voice that says to leave, please follow his instructions. We'll go out through the door we came in. There's an exit right opposite. We'll take a left turn and then go out to the street level. We'll go around and meet over at National Geographic and do a head count, make sure everybody's safe. So nothing's going to happen, but we always start with this little bit of an announcement. I'm very grateful that we can have a good friend, Maeda-san, come and share with us the very important work he's doing at JBIC. It's of much larger significance than people realize, because at a time when America is kind of retreating around the world and pulling back and not being a leader, Japan has stepped forward in a very impressive way. And I really am grateful that Prime Minister Abe has been willing to be a leader. This hasn't always been the case. For so many years, in my experience, Japan wanted to stay behind in the shadow of America and kind of look out around the edges, but not get out itself. That's changed, and very fortunately for us, because we have a government in Japan that is willing to lead and carry the flag of free enterprise and democracy and rule of law, around the world. And it's at a time when, sadly, America is not leading. Japan is. And it's a very important thing. And what's important you're going to be hearing today is, a very important dimension of this leadership. All of the complicated problems in the world are horizontal and all the governments are vertical. So if you're going to deal with substantial problems, you have to have authentic commitment to multilateral cooperation. And that's what JBIC and what Japan is doing. If you saw the last Osaka G20, it was a masterpiece. It was a masterpiece of architecture, strategic thinking, and putting together in place a strategy for dealing with it. So it's really important. Now, I'd also say that this new era that we're entering into is much more about economic competition than it is about military muscle. This is going to be an era of competing models and who offers the best formula for the world. And Japan has done a superb job in developing the architecture. You have a strategy. We're going to hear an important part of that strategy today. So I want to say thank you for coming. This discussion today is far more important than you realize. And I'm very grateful that you're willing to do it with us here at CSIS. So could I ask you, with your very warm applause, to welcome the president of JBIC, Maeda-san. Please come up here.
Thank you, Dr. Hamre. It's a very kind introduction. It's my great honor and pleasure to return to my second hometown in Washington, D.C., and give you some remarks and distinguish the audiences at CSIS. It's very prestigious. Thank you so much. Let me outline that what we are doing under the concept of the free and open Indo-Pacific. As Dr. Hamre referred to that, this concept was introduced and proclaimed by our Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in 2017, firstly in a first summit meeting with President Donald Trump of the United States. And a key component of this free and open Indo-Pacific is to bring stability and prosperity for the entire for Indo-Pacific region. It is a quite new type kind of concept, because it used to be, we say that Asian Pacific. And the Indian Ocean is it's just west side of the Malacca Strait, and to be leads to the Middle East and Africa. So in some sense, this is some counter-proposal to Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. But in my view, it's different, because in my view, the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative is not initiative, no plan, no program. It is a political slogan, because there are no clear definition. On the contrary, the free and open Indo-Pacific initiative have a very clear mandate and definition, which is we have three pillars on this initiative, which is the promotion and establishment of the rule of the law, and freedom of navigation, and free trade. It is a common concept that the Western democratic countries share among us, and the pursuit of the economic prosperity and commitment of peace and stability. And this is a clear rule we need to abide by. And I propose under the concept, the five conditions of our platform. One is transparency, two, inclusiveness, three, viability of the project, four, the sustainability of the debt of host countries, and finally, that rule of the law. This is very important, because now I think that this is the era of geopolitics. And I said Chinese Belt and Road Initiative used to be, I suppose that it be strengthening connectivity from the eastern side of the Eurasian continent, which is in China, through Central Asia countries, and to Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And now, what happened is that the Belt and Road Initiative is everywhere. In a country like Latin America, for example, they said that it's a Belt and Road Initiative. In Africa, same thing. But I don't know what's the exact definition of the Belt and Road Initiative. That's why the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe decided to make some engagement. Only through engagement we can understand what the China is trying to do. So in October last year, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe took the big delegation of both private and public to Beijing, and they co-host the event of the Japan-China cooperation in third countries market in a great hall of the people in Beijing, the big gathering, and both parties signed more than 50 documents. Normally it's a memorandum of understanding type of not legally binding the papers. And we also signed a memorandum of understanding with the China Development Bank. It's a second memorandum of understanding with Chinese, and I propose to the same conditions for our cooperation. Otherwise, if China does not accept, we cannot cooperate. And eventually, China Development Bank, and also that supported by the State Planning Council of China's accepted all five conditions. Therefore, that we have now started cooperation with China Development Bank in a tangible project in Thailand. On a free and open Indo-Pacific side, we signed a trilateral MOU. Originally, that we signed MOU with OPIC in 2017, and then signed again in 2018. July of last year, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce hosted an event of Indo-Pacific Business Forum in Washington, D.C. I participated as a member, as a panelist. where the Secretary of State Mark Pompeo clearly proclaimed a new commitment by the United States government for free and open Indo-Pacific region, in particular in digital economy and energy security and infrastructure. And also I participated in the panel discussion with then OPIC President Ray Washburn, and also that Australian charge d'affaires of the embassy here, and we discussed this. And then after that, we made a press release about this trilateral partnership. And also in 2018, during the visit of the U.S. Vice President Mark Pence, we signed an additional memorandum of understanding. In Tokyo, in my office, then the U.S. Ambassador to Japan, Bill Haggerty, and the Australian Ambassador to Japan, Richard Court, and myself, and the three of us signed a memorandum of cooperation. And I am a deal maker, so that's just signing a MOU is not meaningful. Therefore, that we make tangible case, and JB created the special task force, and for this free and open Indo-Pacific. And also, I retained former Vice Minister for International Affairs, METI, Tadashi Yanase, as my senior advisor, and to give him the role of leading this task force. And we jointly sent a mission to the country like Papua New Guinea, Palau, and also Indonesia. In Palau, we have a tangible project. It's a telecommunication submarine cable, which to be a subset of the submarine cable from Singapore to be connected to the west coast of the United States. And Australians very keen on working on this project. And the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Australia, Secretary Francis Adamson, he has a wide range of knowledge about this region. And also the Australian also transformed their entity like EFIC, Export Finance Insurance Corporation, to be more proactive, and also gives them more budget for them. And JBIC, we have a long understanding is roughly $160 billion. We made loans in 11 different currencies, and we also have a wide variety of the financial products, not just only debt financing, but also the guarantee of bond, the guarantee of loan, and also equity investment. We have a wide range of the financial products. And we are now, in my discussion with OPIC now, US DFC, US side have some statutory constraint. OPIC by statute is not able to support the state-owned enterprises. But country like Papua New Guinea, without involvement of state-owned enterprise, it is not possible to materialize a project. Therefore, that I decided that the OPIC to be also maybe Treasury Department or State Department, the White House, that we need to allow OPIC or now DFC to make more flexible interpretation of the statute. And they need some qualification of the state-owned enterprise to be eligible for his support. I agree. Therefore, that we are now, by project, we are now doing very much the tangible manner. And one more thing is that I'd like to add is that the treatment of Taiwan. I paid a visit to Taipei and had a meeting privately, by the way. Privately. Officially, I was not able to do it. Privately, I had a private meeting with the National Security Advisor of Taiwan and also the Foreign Minister of Taiwan. They have already engaged by transaction with OPIC a year ago, and they are very knowledgeable. And I reported back to the Office of Prime Minister and discuss with them on how to treat the Taiwan. Obviously, we cannot invite Taiwan as an official partner. However, by transaction, we may invite them if it is appropriate, and project by project. That's answered and confirmed by the Office of Prime Minister. So now, what's happened in the Pacific Island like compact countries, and there's leaders of compact countries in Micronesia and so on, paid a visit to Washington, D.C., and to meet President Trump. And now this September of this year, two small island countries in the Pacific Island, which is Kiribati and Solomon Islands, undercut the diplomatic tie with Taiwan, and they start tie with mainland China. That is obviously that's endorsed by the Chinese government, so that we need to be paying due attention to what they are doing right now. And also, I briefly touch upon that our thought on AIIB. I had a meeting with the AIIB's president, Ji Chin, a couple of times, and I made a very straightforward question to him. You know, I visited the head office of AIIB in Beijing. It's a very fancy head office. However, and it's just across the street of the People's Bank of China. However, it's almost empty, nobody there, and only 100 staffers. Therefore, that most of their financing product is in co-financing with World Bank and ADB. But they have some independent, separately independently financial aid to some countries like the state of Oman. And state of Oman is from national security point of view in the Middle East, it's very important. This is outside the Hormuz Strait, and also very close to the Horn of Africa, and therefore that's we also that Japan is dispatched the self-defense maritime forces to anti-piracy the activities, and a project in Port of Duqm, which is outside the state of Hormuz, we provide the financing to establish this port facility many years ago, I mean 16 to 17 years ago. Therefore, that's, I understand that how critical this location of the port. The AIB provided financing independently to this project, to the project of the port facility of Duqm. And but now China recognized that now some of these ideas to be already criticized by the international community. What happened to Sri Lanka? Port of Hambantota. The Export-Import Bank of China provided financing to dollar-based financing to not renminbi to Sri Lanka, but Sri Lanka was not able to pay back. So what's happened is that they switched the contract to the 99 years leasing contract of the piece of land, which is very similar, almost the same that the British Empire did to Hong Kong in 150 years ago. There's some resemblance. And also that China did in Ecuador, it's a very similar thing. Therefore, that now they start beginning understanding that their debt sustainability is a really important issue for international community. And that's why that we are working with China Development Bank under 5 conditions in a project in Thailand, which is a railway link project, total distance in 220 kilometers to link the 3 airports from Bangkok and the southeast part of the Thailand, which is a core project in the Eastern Economic Corridor in Thai government. Last year, in June of 2018, I was privately invited by Thai Prime Minister Prayut to the Greater Mekong Summit. And I had a very private discussion with leaders like Nguyen Xuan Phuc, the Prime Minister of Vietnam, and Hun Sen, the Prime Minister of Cambodia, and so on. And all of them said that we need both China and Japan. That's already introduced this anecdote in my panel in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. This is true, but they do not say that we need the United States. So it means that Japan can play a role of intermediary between them and the United States. So we understand that how they expect us to play. So we are doing that way, so that from the beginning, I mean that we have been engaged the project from the scratch and to make the project bankable. We cover the expense of the feasibility study as a free of charge. This is what we're doing right now. And we are now, as Dr. Hamre said, that we recognize that our law to play a leading role of three trilateral partnerships. And this is very important because I think that it's now in the year of 2019, 20, 21 is a very narrow window of opportunity because of U.S.-China conflict. Now Chinese are trying to change some behavior. And this year, former governor of People's Bank of China, Zhou Shaochun, came to my office. I hosted dinner for him by inviting leaders of the Japanese financial sectors. And he said almost publicly that we need to promote the China-Japan financial cooperation. And we simultaneously listed the ETF and both Tokyo Stock Exchange and the Shanghai Stock Exchange. It's the first time for foreign Japanese security companies, which is Nomura, received a license of the activities in China as the majority shareholder of joint venture with a Chinese partner. So this is some of the evidence that China is trying to change the course. And in Bangkok, by the way, I found that CDB's China Development Bank is practice, and they also try to accommodate the international practices, but still some gap. But they're serious. Therefore, that's a good thing. So therefore, that we try to keep this kind of relation with the China Development Bank, and we try to change their behavior to be more consistent with international standards. So this is a very quick remarks, which I try to share with all of you. And then I'm delighted to have a dialogue with my dear friend, Dr. Michael Green. Thank you so much.
It's always, we've known each other well over 20 years, but always such a rich conversation on, as John Hamre said, the world's problems are horizontal and the world's bureaucracies are vertical. JBIC is one of the few organizations in the world that's mostly horizontal, that deals with strategic questions. It helps to have money, which JBIC, of course, has. But as you can hear from Maeda-san, JBIC's reach is truly strategic. And Maeda-san, as many of you may know, is not only a close advisor to Prime Minister Abe, he may be one of the only people in Japan who is also a close advisor to the previous government and then the government before that. So he is part of the reason for the consistency and longevity in Japan's strategy. Let me also thank Maeda-san. We're going to have, starting in January, a senior official from JBIC embedded at CSIS to work on free and open Indo-Pacific strategy with a particular focus on infrastructure and financing, but looking at it comprehensively. And we'll invite all of you to join in that dialogue in the coming year. Let me first ask you about geography. You know, the Belt and Road is defined by Beijing endlessly. There's an Arctic Belt and Road, there's an outer space Belt and Road. The U.S. Free and Open Indo-Pacific strategy pretty much corresponds to Indo-PACOM. How do you, geographically, just to begin, how do you define FOIP at JBIC? How far does it go?
Well, originally the concept started from the strengthening connectivity between free Asian Pacific and Indo-Pacific, Indian Ocean. So it means that to avoid the choke point, which is the Strait of Malacca, and also to reach Middle East and Africa. Therefore, that also the Pacific Rim is very broad. For example, that's the west coast of United States and Canada, and also in some Latin American countries on Western Pacific Rim is a part of that. Therefore, that we are doing with a counterpart of the United States in a project in Latin as well. So that obviously, but is not included a country like Russia or the inland. So it's a kind of maritime countries normally. Therefore, that's target is like a country like Indonesia. And also, we need to have some centrality and solidarity with ASEAN countries. So we also try to send some messages that your countries are prioritized for free and open, but not limited to them. So that some countries in Africa, Latin America could be included if they are agreed on the 5 conditions I referred to.
So it's flexible.
Flexible.
Not as flexible as China's Belt and Road, but more flexible than the American bureaucratic definition. Your comments on China were fascinating. One of the questions now as the U.S. Engages in a much more strategically competitive relationship with China is whether U.S. policies or policies with friends and allies can shape Chinese behavior. Can we get China to behave in a more benign way? And it seems to me, surveying Chinese economic, foreign, and security policy, the kind of test case for that in many ways is what you're doing. It's whether or not JBIC's dialogue with China Development Bank on infrastructure might change the way China does Belt and Road. And after you met with Chinese counterparts, China announced the second Belt and Road Forum, BARF2, as it's known, and that the theme would be quality infrastructure, which is really interesting because that, of course, is a theme Japan introduced, in some ways, I think, to put pressure on China. So how would you assess things? Is China's agreement to your 5 conditions just lip service? Is this just PR? Or do you think there's a real chance that we can have an influence on how China does infrastructure investment and financing?
Well, it's a good question and also tough question. My sense is a little bit early to make a judgment, and we have to monitor what they're doing. But what we found through this engagement with China development banks are a couple of things. Let me share. One is that in a critical point, a CDB is not able to make an own decision without consultation with a body like NDRC. So that they are trying to be very cautious, and they don't want to have a responsibility on decision making. And also the CDB's top leaders have been changed most recently because of the former one, Mr. Hu, was indicted because of a scandal. So they're now more and more reluctant and cautious to make a judgment by themselves. Everything is now consult with a NDRC. That's what happened. Yeah. Secondly, we found some of the articles of the loan agreement of their use. Some of them are not consistent with the global standards. For example, that they are encouraging be consistent with the Chinese procurement guideline. This is not global standard. So we need to pay respect to the procurement standard of host countries normally. So therefore, that this is different. But now they are now beginning of understanding what's the matter. But also that you refer to the quality infrastructure. It's introduced by originally that obviously Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The President Xi referred to quality infrastructure in this second Belt and Road conference in Beijing 6 times. But to me, China may not understand the clear definition of what's the law of what's the meanings of quality infrastructure. It does not mean only that the physical quality infrastructure. It means that we need to be consistent with a agenda like climate change, more environmental friendly, and ESG is a part of quality infrastructure. And most energy efficiency is also part of quality infrastructure. Therefore, that they do not understand fully yet. And also that quality infrastructure is a very much a meaning or to give some guidance towards for the developing countries. For example, that in May of this year, I paid a visit to Hanoi and a meeting with Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc of Vietnam. We received many applications of coal-fired power plants. And the OECD allows us to make financing if the technology is better than ultra supercritical technology. However, I said to Prime Minister Phuc, it takes a long time, maybe average 8 to 9 years to materialize from receiving the request and the materializing project. Therefore, if we accept this ultra supercritical coal-fired power plants now, it means that it binds the future. So technology is now advancing. So that I said, I'm sorry, but I'd like to stop the receiving application coal-fired power plants now. And then, but if you, Vietnamese Prime Minister, accept to accommodate the better technology, less burden on the environment, like coal gasification, even if you use coal gasification or carbon capture, storage, and so on, we can support. So this is a quality infrastructure. This is very much consistent with the advancement progress of technology.
That's not necessarily what President Xi Jinping means.
No,
I remember
think so.
In 2005, I was in the White House and Deputy Secretary of State Bob Zoellick gave his famous speech calling on China to be a responsible stakeholder. And a few months later, Hu Jintao came to Washington and he gave a speech and he said 12 times, China is a responsible stakeholder. And then it was just lip service. But this might be different because I would imagine that your counterparts in China Development Bank, as professionals and as bankers and as economists, worry about the moral hazard, worry about how their money is spent, worry about, debt traps are bad for the lenders too. At least in economic terms. Strategically, there are advantages to China, perhaps, but there are a lot of flaws, I'm sure, that Chinese bankers see. Do you find that within the Chinese system, the political leaders are the more reluctant, but your counterparts within the banks generally understand what you're talking about? Is that how you would describe it?
Well,
or is it,
there's some difference between Export-Import Bank and the China Development Bank. Well, Export-Import Bank is more closer to Chinese government. It's a matter of the degree, but the China Development Bank, the officials try to be part of the banking society in the global banking society world. But if some of the order from the top, there's no way that they have to obey that order. Therefore, what they, for example, that these banks still continue to support the project in Venezuela. Venezuela is not able to pay back, so we have the kind of, kind of strangling asset in Vietnam. So normally that we cannot make loan anymore, but they continue to make loan. So that this is a totally different from the common understanding of the community, global community.
So which is easier to work with, the China Development Bank or OPIC? Don't answer that. I think Matt Goodman also hears from friends of ours in private equity, a lot of interest in this new US, Japan, and Australia memorandum of cooperation. Can you tell us the state of affairs?
Yes, and I before coming to Washington D.C., I stayed in New York City. I had a couple of meetings with private equity guys like KKR and BlackRock, and I had a meeting one by one with Mr. Henry Kravis of KKR, and he said that KKR's commitment is as a long-term investor. It may include infrastructure, and also in BlackRock they are now doing a lot in renewable energy, and it's like wind power and solar power, and globally. But main target is still in the U.S. and Europe, but try to be advanced to the new emerging area, like Indo-Pacific region, they say. And also that KKR said that we think that Japan as a hub of the international financing in Asia and the Pacific. And so that despite the kind of problems we face, challenges like the senior society and aging society, and population is declining. However, that we need to give some solutions. So Japan is a really first country to give some solutions to those problems. Probably China may face the same challenges in a couple years later, right? So therefore, I feel that now those private equity industry in the United States is now shifting the focus, not just on the U.S. and European market, on also that market like Indo-Pacific.
My understanding is a lot of the projects that you're discussing with the China Development Bank and also other projects you're discussing with OPIC and with Australia tend to be in energy, transportation infrastructure, railroads, things like that. But you mentioned earlier that Yanase-san of METI is now advising you on FOIP. Yanase-san's also advising the government on 5G. Is 5G on your radar? Are you thinking about that? Because the digital Belt and Road the Chinese are offering, critics would say, and I would agree, involves a lot of 3-4 year interest-free loans, predatory dumping and price cuts and other things to create monopolistic positions. And for a lot of developing countries, whatever 5G system the US, Japan, or Europe come up with is going to be expensive. So it's strategically maybe even more important than railroads and energy and bridges. Is it on your radar?
Yes, I was in Stockholm months ago, and I found that they face the same problem or question how to deal with the Huawei, include or exclude. So that views of Nokia, for example, those guys are very important to on this question. Our position is very clear right now. So we are now not explicitly, we do not say that we exclude Huawei on such a specific company, but the de facto basis, we are very much careful, very careful, and also that year of 2019, 20, 21, this is a very critical moment, and possibly narrow window of opportunity to catch up the Huawei and others and in a more competitive manner. But I'm afraid that now, because of U.S.-China conflict, China is more badly affected by the conflict than the United States this year or next year. But China tried to change its supply chain. Probably in 4 or 5 years, they may catch up. Therefore, my sense is that it is not able to contain China. It's not practical. Therefore, that we as the international community, as allies, as U.S. needs Japan, U.S. needs Europe as a very robust, very strong partner, and to foster that platform. That's very important. And then China may change their behavior. Otherwise, they will not. That's my point.
Let me open it up a bit. Ask my colleague Matt Goodman, who works a lot on infrastructure and economic issues. If you want to ask the first question, you just there are many angles Matt could bring to this. But
thanks so much, and good to see you again, Maeda-san. Really interesting comments. Can I ask a sort of 2 questions? First, a practical question. When you sign an MOU with another entity, and how do you operationalize your cooperation? Because JBIC's mandate is to promote, frankly, Japanese business and Japanese exports, and USDFC's is to promote. How do you actually operationally come together and enable the 2 entities to work? Do they work in parallel on different things, or do they overcome that basic set of objectives and the mission of each entity in order to be able to do it? That's a sort of practical question, because I genuinely don't understand how that works. The broader question is, some critics here of the U.S. strategy that the free and open economic say that, and the infrastructure piece in particular, that we're putting a lot of chips on the US DFC, the new Development Finance Corporation, but that's, while necessary, far from sufficient, our engagement in this effort. So what else, from your perspective, do you think the United States ought to be doing and bringing to the table beyond the DFC tool?
Thank you, Matt. It's a very good question. Now, on the first question, very practical question, created the task force jointly, and in a working level of people, the construction or not, for example, now DFC still yet is to make financing to the state-owned it's less than 50%. We make qualify as a eligible borrower of this. And also we need some of devices like to make some of a special purpose vehicle. And on sovereign side, JBIC will support, and private side support by the DFC. That kind of division of labor can be considered. And on the Australia side, the Australian has asset products of the grant. Therefore, that we can make use of this Australian piece as well. And most importantly, we need a collaboration between the private sector from Japan and the United States. And if the company like GE or the American companies work together with the Japanese companies, it's much easier for us to accommodate. So we are now encouraging that, for example, in Papua New Guinea, we have trading companies, but out of the 8 or 9 big trading companies, only one company has an office in Port Moresby. It is Sojitsu Corporation. So that I encourage the other bigger companies to make some of the office in right now, so that the couple start creating the office, and also they try to gather information, relevant information. So that's our proactive engagements from the scratch of a project. This makes the project bankable, and sharing also that's the mitigating some of the constraints they have, and also the human rights issue as well. That our condition is not so strict than the United States. Therefore, that's also carbon footprint and so on. These are some constraints from the US side. We understand. So we try to overcome through this constraint with discussion, and almost every day we keep in through the email and so on. So that's the video conference and so on. So that's what happened right now. So that it's the first time we have to send dispatch mission jointly. We did already. So that's a question. The second one is a most more tougher question. But I understand some question, but we understand, in our memorandum understanding, that we understand that we try to foster the common asset, global common asset in the Pacific. And this is not easy piece, and for example that previously we worked on we give some additionality on ASEAN plus something, ASEAN plus. But this is it's different approach. Therefore, that this is a new approach. Therefore, that we need to be clear some of the problem. I understand it, but step by step through our engagement, we may be able to find a better truck.
I'm going to call in one more CSIS colleague and then open it up. So if you're thinking of asking a question, you can get your thoughts together. I'll call on Errol Yacob from the Development and Prosperity Program at CSIS.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Green, and thanks for convening this really important event. Thank you. It's an honor to have you back at CSIS. I feel like DC is not only your second home, but maybe CSIS is your second home.
Thank you.
So, I wanted to comment just very briefly on your characterization of the BRI. I completely agree that it's a compelling marketing vision, maybe even a brand, although the product is a little bit unclear. And so I really appreciated your presentation of that. I wanted to build on my colleague Matt's point about the DFC and OPIC. I really liked how you said, MOUs are fine, but I'm a deal maker. Can you paint a vision of what actually that type of deal making looks like with the DFC, let's say 2 years from now? The DFC, if it ever launches, and I'm really glad that you met Adam yesterday, I think that there's a lot of optimism about if the DFC can ever get approved finally by, as part of the budget process, that this will be a really force for good in the world. I agree with Dr. Green that maybe it's not the transformative alternative to BRI in and of itself. But I think it does have new capabilities and new tools and new abilities to co-finance with the JBICs of the world that they didn't have before. They now have equity authority. They do have some soft money for project preparation like the Australians. So if you could paint a vision of what that looks like maybe 2 years from now. And a quick second question is, the DFC is being asked to do more in fragile states and places that maybe offer slightly greater risk, slightly lower return. And so does JBIC have a particular approach, perhaps with the DFC or separate with regards to fragile states? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. On the first question also, that relating to the second question, Matt, that we need to observe their performance more of DFC. And for example, to that question, I refer to that their constraint about the state-owned enterprise. I asserted to the President, the Walsh and David Bohegan, that they did not respond. Right? So that I started more than 18 months ago, but so far nothing happened. Therefore, but Adam understood it. That he clearly said that we need to change this. We start some of a consultation with other parts of the executive branches, like Treasury and State and so on, so that we see the performance. Also, that we offer some devices to relax the guidelines. And for example, we taking a piece of the more sovereign type product, and they push the more private to the DFC side. That can be some division of labor can be possible, but this is still we need to apply to the tangible cases, not only conceptual. As I said, as a dream maker, means that we need to engage in the project and the stakeholder from scratch. It takes time, and it takes cost. In the JBIC, by the way, we have the two separate accounts. Most recently, Japan Diet accepted to create a special operation account, which enabled JBIC to take more risk. And also, by statute, we need to define that the risk category, which we take under this special operation account, like a sovereign, non-investment grade sovereign, like Argentina, for example, or Iraq. We did not do that. I don't want to. But and also the sub-sovereign, like a sub-sovereign risk of the province or government, municipality, and so on. And three, and most recent one is a technology and commercialization risk. Even if the level is a proven technology, but not fully commercial yet, so that normally private sector will not make any financing to such a technology. Therefore, that we give some bridging operation through this special operation account. So that probably, because we are a front runner on this so-called development financing institution, Europeans are trying the same thing in the World Bank meeting here, and the European Investment Bank, European policymakers to strengthen EIB and maybe a merger between EIB and the EBRD. It's kind of some sort of the agenda is now going on. I don't know. I don't think that it can happen. But anyway, that I also have some relationship with EIB, and key is that as a long-term investor, we share the common agenda, like the removal of the plastic waste from ocean, right, from issue. EIB is very keen. We are trying to do the same thing, that we encourage new technology to make solution for that removal of the waste, plastic waste from ocean. This is also quality infrastructure.
Excellent. Floor is open. If you have a question, raise your hand. We have a mic for you. Yeah, please.
Yes, my name is Takahashi from NEC, and thank you very much for a very insightful discussion this morning, and thank you very much also for your leadership in private-public partnership for U.S.-Japan cooperation in that region. My question is on digital infrastructure, and you have already mentioned submarine cable and 5G, but my question is about smart city programs, and for one of the BRI by China, also I understand include the smart city, but one of the concern is under the name of smart city, they might export their surveillance system to that region, and particularly it's a concern if they do that with the authoritarian regime. It's a threat to the democracy. So, but in that area, I think there's a lot technology companies of US and Japan can cooperate and create the system that respect the democracy and privacy and the human rights. So if I'm interested in if you have some plans or thoughts in the area. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question, but especially smart city. So far, to be frank with you, we have not found yet appropriate project in this Indo-Pacific region in a smart city project. But JBIC, we have the criteria of definition of smart city. The key point is that to improve quality of life of the residents. That's a key, and we make a lot of surveillance study in many so-called smart cities world. And I think the model of the better model in the country like Sweden and Denmark, and a kind of community is building, not just only that residents, but also that municipal government and the local authority and the private company like Ericsson and Nokia and so on. These are also a part of their solution, and also they evolving. So they, for example, that one of the best smart city in the world in Sweden, the Royal Port of smart city in Sweden, and they started in 1990s, and they already established some of intercourse among those stakeholders. So that this is the deal. So that we understand that quality of life, improving quality of life. But on the other hand, Chinese case, for example, I paid a visit to so-called smart city of China. It means that they're all digital and very close to the concept of the e-government. You know, therefore, that your concern is very relevant. Now we are required to fingerprints all 10 fingers on the surveillance camera. There are surveillance cameras everywhere. Therefore, that this is very carefully, that we now define very carefully. But digital one is, like Secretary Pompeo said, this digital economy, digital is the key component of free and open in the Pacific Peninsula.
Excellent. Yes, please.
Thank you for your insightful speech today. My name is Jung Ho Lee. I'm from South China Morning Post. You said earlier that you actually plan to invite Taiwan to the Indo-Pacific strategy, but you can't do that now. But in the future, you said you may invite them by project. What are some of the projects you may cooperate with Taipei within the framework of Indo-Pacific strategy? And also, have you actually discussed this with the officials in Taipei, or is it more like Tokyo's long-term objective in the future? Thank you.
Thank you. A question that by transaction means that also we may invite China. If China agreed with all 5 conditions, this is an example that we already doing with the China Development Bank in Thailand. Taiwan case, Taiwan, we do not have a diplomatic tie with Taiwan. Therefore, we cannot invite them as a country and officially as a partner of a free and open Indo-Pacific. However, transaction means that it's a private-driven. Therefore, that if there's many cases, even Chinese are also cooperating with Taiwan entity as well. It's my view that Taiwan economy and mainland economy of China is very much integrated already. And therefore, that it's a matter, from the economic point of view, this makes sense. So that is we do not have any political implication on it. It's because Taiwan already have some tie with OPEC a year ahead of us. Therefore, that they know very knowledgeable about what's going on in a public small island countries like Marshall and Solomon and so on. Therefore, that if it is appropriate, we would invite them as a transaction.
So as you can see, Maeda-san has the most interesting job in Japan. The geographic scope, the functional scope, political risk assessment, fundamental questions of geopolitics. If we had more time, Maeda-san could hold forth on Islamic financing, which he's a specialist on, the Russian Far East, even I think bullet trains in Texas and California. But we're out of time, I'm sorry to say. So he has a bit here for the bank and fund meetings, a lot of important coordination to do with the administration. We need to let him go. But first, let's thank him very much for his terrific presentation.
Thank you.